Hi everyone, Rashmi Phillips here, voice of Amita Dasgupta and co-writer of the Usher Foundation. Just wanted to enter in at the top of the episode here to let you know when our next episode will be out and to let you guys know about our hiatus. Episode 10, which will be our next episode, will be out on July 18th. That's the third Friday of the month. And it's kind of a milestone for us. So we will be taking a couple month hiatus just to finalize some things for the rest of season 1, get some writing done, get some recording done, hopefully do some cool editing, just trying to make sure that the people who listen have the coolest experience they can. And we'll do another reminder again at the top of the next episode. But thank you all so much for those of you who listen. And we will hear from you again soon. Enjoy. Content warnings. Phonophobia. Graphic depictions of violence. Blood. Vomit. Implied child death. Please listen at your own discretion.
Okay, one more and I can go. Statement of... Fuck. Okay, here we go. Statement of Sara Lawson, age 32 at time of statement. Statement number 08253215. Summary of statement. An infectious violence occurring in her hometown. Original statement taken August 25th, 2015. Recorded by Mari Delatour, archival assistant at the Usher Foundation of Paranormal Research, Washington, D.C. Statement begins. It's true what they say about crime rates skyrocketing in the heat. Sociologists reckon it's something to do with the longer days under the sweltering sun, the way it stirs up aggression in people. All I know is that rising temperatures can bring out the devil in mankind. My mama used to say you ain't seen hell till you spent a summer in the South. It gets hot. Fry an egg on the sidewalk hot. Heat stroke hot. The type of heat that tends to make folk real antsy and irritated. It's a heat that crawls and swells, like sweat dripping down a brow, water climbing to a silent boil, a baby dying of a fever in its sleep. That's how hot it was the summer they all died. July of 1995. Even now, I still remember them all. The people they were, the monsters they became. I've found myself thinking about them more and more lately, at night before I drift off to sleep. I see their faces when I dream. The horrible expressions they wore in their final moments, etched forever in my mind. At any rate, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm here after all this time because I can't hold them in anymore. All of the dark memories ready to spill out of me. I don't care if you believe me or not. I just need somewhere safe to put them. For the most part, my childhood was downright idyllic. I miss what it was before everything went wrong. I grew up in Andalusia, Alabama, surrounded by forests full of red gum trees and longleaf pines. I was real close with the other children in my block. Most of our parents worked long hours at the local manufacturing plant, meaning we practically raised ourselves. When school wasn't in session, our days were spent running through the streets, feet slapping against the burning asphalt and faces stained red with mulberries. At night, our hollering could be heard echoing throughout the town as we filled countless jars with lightning bugs. The community was super tight-knit, almost like one big extended family, which was nice in some ways, but it also meant that everybody knew everybody's business. Nothing stayed a secret for long. It was a neighborhood full of gossip and whispers, porches that cracked and swayed under the weight of aunties sipping sweet tea and doling out mildly judgmental stares. Everything was simple then, familiar and comfortable, or maybe that's just how it felt. Childhood memories are tricky that way, sepia-colored and tainted by an unburdened frame of mind. From what I can remember, 1995 was a particularly rough year for everybody. one that strained the limits of folks' southern hospitality and small-town warmth. That spring had brought a large wave of factory layoffs, resulting in a near-constant air of fear and uncertainty. It was the highest unemployment rate Andalusia had seen in years. Even as a sixth grader, I could pick up on the difference in the adults' behavior, the weariness in their eyes and the tension in their every movement. I know now that nobody wanted to go into the winter months and holidays without a job. Our family was rocked in a major way. My mama was able to keep her job as a nurse, but Pa was one of the nearly 50 people in our community that got laid off. And without his money, things were tight. I can't recall my parents fighting much before, but that year they argued all the time. They used loud, scary voices that drove me under the covers to hide from their constant bickering. I tried to shield my baby brother Joe from as much as I could, though most of it seemed to go over his little toddler brain. As soon as June hit and temperatures began to climb, their arguments seemed to intensify. I caught fragments of conversations from the safety of my room. Ma complaining about Pa's wallowing around the house, and Pa shooting back that he didn't know why they decided to live in this stupid dead-end town anyways. And it wasn't just my parents. All of the adults in town became more and more short-tempered, ticking away like a pressure cooker. I watched them devolve into unrecognizable versions of themselves. Mr. Jacobs, my best friend's pops and our next-door neighbor, was among the earlier victims of the anger sickness. That summer, he started building a new fence around his backyard, and with each fall of the hammer, his frustration grew. I sat on our deck to watch, observing his reddening face and scrunched brows. He muttered things while he worked. I never caught what he was saying exactly. Mostly it sounded like cussing. I remember the way spittle got everywhere when he was angry, how the red of his face would get so deep it was almost purple. The more upset he got, the sloppier his work, until eventually he'd throw his hammer down and just start kicking things. Ordinarily, I would have found this kind of behavior amusing from adults, but there was something more, too. Something in his eyes when he'd be kicking that fence. Some kind of rage that scared me a little, though I couldn't get a handle on what it was that unnerved me so at the time. A few nights a week, he would invite my pa and some other men in the neighborhood over for whiskey and cards. And they sat in a fuming circle of lawn chairs, talking furiously about corporate greed, about politics, about Cubans coming from American jobs. Mrs. Tula, a plump older woman, best known for supplying the neighborhood kids with our daily dose of desserts, also began acting unusually that summer. As the days went on, she stopped her baking, her handing out of candies, and her inquiries about our favorite school subjects. Instead, she took to sitting on her porch, yelling at children to stop running amok across her lawn, dabbing at her sweating neck and chest with a cloth. Her leathery, crinkled face that usually held a sugar-sweet smile was now in a near constant mask of irritation that I didn't recognize. As she screamed at us kids, I could have sworn her teeth looked different, more sharp somehow, jagged, like a rabid dog's. The thick, hot air seemed to balloon as the neighbors' irritations and anger reached a boiling point. I recall the day it all blew up with a surprising clarity. It was muggy out, and like most days that summer, hotter than sin. The type of day that has people blasting their box fans and sticking their heads in freezers to escape the suffocating temperatures. My parents told me to stay in. It was too hot to play outside anyways, and besides, someone needed to look after my brother. Ma went to work and Pa was at a job interview, so I was left to entertain myself while Joe slept away upstairs. I remember that I was doing something in the living room, drawing, maybe, or reading a book, when I just happened to glance out the window. Now, something you have to understand is that down south, there's a distinct sort of background noise, namely the constant buzz of cicadas. As soon as it starts to warm up in May or so, you start hearing that awful humming, and you hate it at first, but then you get used to it. It turns into ambiance. Makes it real startling when you travel somewhere without cicadas for the first time. You notice the quiet. All your background noise is gone. It was when I looked out my front room window that I realized that all the cicadas singing had stopped. There was complete eerie silence that made my tongue feel thick and dry in my mouth. My breath hitched as I waited, feeling for all the world like I was going completely mad. Then the cicada sounds came back. It was like all the noises in the world returning at once. The cicada's crying was unbearably loud, decibels louder than it had ever been before. I jumped slightly, then inched toward the window to press my face against the warm glass. Faintly, I could hear shouting coming from outside, rising slightly above the raucous buzzing. I couldn't quite see what was going on, but I could see shapes running, sprinting toward downtown. Right away in my little kid brain, I knew two things. That something awful was happening, and that I had to go outside to see what it was. I know it doesn't make any sense. My parents told me to stay indoors, and my baby brother was sleeping upstairs, but, well, bull-headed kids will be kids, I suppose. I didn't have any better judgment. I went right out the front door and ran down the road. I ran all the way to Main Street, a full 2 blocks. I faltered when I saw 2 men by the post office. At first, they looked like they were hugging. My feet slowed to a walk, and as I got closer, I stopped, frozen in terror at what I saw. The men, who I then recognized as Mr. Fowle, the librarian, and Mr. Whitaker, the mailman, were slick with sweat from the heat. They weren't hugging, but were instead engaged in a violent tussle, blood streaming from temples, noses, fists. Punches flew as I stood, staring, frightened, for what seemed like an eternity. The fight ended abruptly when Mr. Fowle pulled something from his pocket and jabbed it clean through Mr. Whitaker's head. There was a sickening crunch as he fell onto the burning sidewalk, seeping blood onto the concrete. I watched as the librarian, a man who had just recently helped me pick out fantasy novels to read, grabbed a nearby stone and knelt next to his victim, beginning to bash his skull in. I thought of the time Pa had hit a raccoon with his truck when I was little. The skull shattered into pieces, flecks of bone and grit and meat melding into a big salad. The dead man kept twitching with every blow. I vomited, the wet bile sizzling as it hit the road. Suddenly, Mr. Fowle snapped his head left to look at me, causing me to step back speedily without meaning to. His face was speckled with blood and bits of brain, and his eyes were a deep black, like the pupils had swallowed his irises. What shook me the most was his face. He didn't look crazy or possessed or anything. He looked determined. His mouth was a hard, set line, and his eyes were clear. It reminded me of Mr. Jacobs and his expression when he got angry building his fence. It scared me more than anything had in my entire life. I could feel my body trying to urge me to run, to hide, as he started for me. I should have gone straight home and locked the doors and windows and hidden with my brother somewhere safe and dark and quiet. I should have been a good big sister and protected both of us from whatever terrible thing was happening. I almost did it, too. My legs were unlocking, my arms were tensing up to fight my way out if I needed to. But then Mr. Fowle's determined eyes turned away from me. He looked at the body beneath him, smiled, and stood up. I had the good sense to move then. I started making my way home, running as fast as my scrawny legs could take me. I had the good sense to move then. I started making my way home, running as fast as my scrawny legs could take me. Everywhere, the cicadas cried too loudly, the sun relentlessly abused the town, and every adult around me had gone insane. I passed Mr. Dale, the banker, beating down on his neighbor's back with a brick. The woman's spine was jilted and bent at weird angles, and she kept making a low, moaning sound while she tried to crawl away. I saw Mrs. Bagley stalking around to her backyard with an already bloody axe, and I thought of her son, Randy, who was in my class. Outside the bank, Officer O'Connell was locked in a struggle with Davy Peterson, the town drunk, his gun and belt abandoned a little ways away. Davy and the officer were biting and spitting at each other. I felt sick from the smell of pennies and death in the air. I stumbled through my neighborhood, screaming for help until my vocal cords were rubbed raw, looking for someone, anyone who was normal, who could call the police. I nearly sobbed in relief when from down the street I spotted Mrs. Tula, sitting on her porch for afternoon tea. I turned off from the main road, running up to her path. But the closer I got, the more obvious it was that something was wrong. Her face was spotted with blood, and she smiled a sterile grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. The scraping of the spoon on her porcelain teacup hurt my ears almost as badly as the noise of the cicadas. I slowly touched the tip of my finger to my ear. It came away bloody. Barely covered behind Miss Tula's skirts was a body, its head twisted the wrong way, the neck all bruised and sticking out at wrong angles. I recognized my schoolteacher, Mrs. Rodner, with a yell permanently carved into her unmoving, ashen face. I backed away, real slow, like you would from a raging bear, heart hammering, the hairs on my arms so on end that my skin hurt. It was at the end of the sidewalk, quaking in fear that I heard it, wailing from across the street. With a start, I realized it was coming from my house, from my baby brother, Joe. The sound of my brother's crying shook me out of my paralysis, and I turned again to run. I had to find him. I had to protect him. I had to be a good big sister. I threw open the door to my house, hardly registering my pa's truck parked in an awkward angle in the driveway. There were burning black tire marks along the road leading up to it. Inside, Joe was sitting on the living room floor, his tiny toddler hands covering his ears, as he screamed, and tears rolled down his fat baby cheeks. On either side of him stood my parents. Their faces were completely twisted veils of malice and rage. There was something animal in the set of their bodies, the gleam of their eyes. Their clothes were splattered with blood, and I had no idea whose it was. My mama held a kitchen knife, and Pa wielded an iron, burning steam curling off the edges. Neither of them saw me or heard me. They just crouched, ready to pounce. I couldn't get my mouth to form words. I knew I had to shout, to tell them to stop, to get their attention somehow, but all I could do was stand there, afraid, mouth dropped in terror. Then, in a single moment, the cicadas stopped crying, and it was like the entire world let out a breath that I didn't even realize it had been holding. And just like that, it was over. My parents each blinked hard and dropped their weapons. The clatter of the iron and the knife startled me, and I threw myself at my baby brother. I wrapped my arms around him and looked up at my parents, trying to figure out if they were still going to strike. But instead, they were looking around, confused. My pa asked what was on their clothes. Mama put a hand over her mouth and looked like she was going to be sick. They stared at Joe and at me, a horrified question heavy in their eyes. There was complete and utter silence. I braced myself for another terrible moment, but nothing happened. Then the panicked wailing and screaming started, and I knew the rest of the town was realizing what they'd done. I started bawling. I clutched my brother like he was the one comforting me. I didn't let go of him for hours. "30 people died that day. I had friends who lost parents, grandparents, loved ones. Our town never was the same. And everyone else in Andalusia became divided. Doors were locked, trust was broken, everyone blamed everyone else for the unspeakable acts of violence that took place. Sleepovers and playdates were canceled. Parties were limited to a select few. No one wanted to set anyone off because they were no longer sure what the other was capable of. Local politicians and police officers tried to downplay what happened, no doubt because they didn't want to make national news and have the whole country in an uproar. I figured that because we were a small town no one cared about, the world was happy to turn a blind eye to what happened. The local newspapers say it was a case of townsfolk turning on each other, of tempers running rampant. But the thing is, I knew these people. I did. The way they came for each other's throats was not natural. Never in my years on the good Lord's earth have I ever seen people change on a dime like that. I've met all kinds of people, but never have I seen anything like that July day of 1995. I'll never forget the sight of bone and brain and blood on concrete, or the sound of that teacup, or the steam hissing from the iron in my pa's hand. My parents don't remember anything, just like all the other adults in my neighborhood. I later learned that it was only the kids who had to watch as neighbor turned on neighbor, as friend slaughtered friend. It was only us who bore witness to the carnage, the brutality of that strange and angry affliction that tore apart our town. But no one would listen to us. Our tales were, after all, just the words of frightened children. As soon as I hit 18, I went away to college. I moved as far north as I could go, all the way to Minnesota. I've roamed from state to state for work, but now I prefer Minnesota's climate. It took me a long time to get used to the cold winters and the lack of community. But even up there, I can't escape the summers. I still get nervous when I hear the cicadas and their cries that sound more like screams. Statement ends. So, Amita's follow-up notes say that Sara Lawson still lives in Minnesota, though in the past year she moved from Minneapolis to Duluth. Amita contacted her to follow up on her statement, and she stands by everything she wrote here. Lawson's parents both passed away. Her father died of lung cancer, and her mother died in a car accident only a year after her father's death. It looks like Amita also tried to get in contact with other residents of Andalusia, Alabama, but it seems that residents who would have experienced the anger sickness still have little to no memory of that day. Mita does note that, according to artifact storage, the Foundation recovered something from Andalusia in August of 2007, a book belonging to Jürgen Leitner, apparently a big name in paranormal research. The book is currently locked in artifact storage with extreme precautions surrounding it, though she notes that occasionally cicadas can be heard in the room it's locked in. Okay, whatever. Okay, statement ends.
The Magnus Archives is a podcast written by Jonathan Sims and produced by Alexander J. Newall and distributed by Rusty Quill. Story, characters, and ideas written about in this fan-made project belong to Rusty Quill. The Usher Foundation is a fan-made project co-written by Rashmi Phillips and Mari and edited by Mari, Kaylee F, Amber, and Emma. All audio used in this project was Creative Commons Use Audio. Thank you for listening.